Tukua te wairua ki a rere. Tukua te Māori ka oho. Ruruku ki a ranginui. Ruruku ki a papatōnuku. Ko tēnei te rangi ka u. Ko tēnei te rangi ka mau. Ko tēnei te rangi ka ruruku. Ko enei tauira te whenua ki te rangi i te Taiao ki te arorangi. I rokutia noa atu. Tūturu o whiti whakamaua ki a tīna, tīna. Haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Send forth the spiritual essence so it flows. Send forth the vital life essence to awaken. Bound together to the sky above, bound together to the earth below. This is the day to be sustained. This is the day to seize hold of. This is the day to be bound together. These examples are of the land and sky, from the environment to the universal domains that weave us together from long ago. Steadfast as a shining light to behold and be fixed, affirmed by us gathered here, and so it is. Kia ora koutou, over to you, Nick.
Thank you very much, Rā. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this webinar for the Te Taiao Webinar Series, Restoration Week. My name's Nick Tansley, and this is sort of what I do. I do these webinars all the time, and this is a fantastic thing to be doing with for 6 days in a row. We have two marvellous people joining us tonight to help us through with this. Of course, we've just heard the karakia from Rāwiri Smith. Rā, it's lovely to have you here. Before we talk to Henk, Rā, can you just, in your own words, just give us a bit of an idea of where you're from, and so that we get to know you a bit better?
Kia ora, Nick, and kia ora, everybody. I'm from Wairarapa, close to a place called Gladstone. Our marae's at Hiranui-Rangi. That's where, for us, the centre of the universe is. And one of the things I do is I'm a environmental manager for Rāwiri Kahungunu Ki Wairarapa. And I've been working alongside our community and alongside Greater Wellington in terms of forming a framework and called Mauri Tūhono, and we'll be talking about that tonight.
Great, thank you, Rā. Cheryl actually already has put beautiful karakia, Rā, with a big smiley face. So that's obviously a fan. And Cheryl, thanks for starting it off in our chat box. That chat box there, everybody, is available to you to just ask questions, things you'd like to know during our presentations over the next week or so. And also, it's nice to know where you're from. Cheryl, maybe you can tell us where you're from in a little one of those chats, and just anyone actually who's viewing this can do the same. And we'll use it sort of as a way to communicate with everybody who's involved. There's Alistair. Kia ora. Thank you, Alistair. And our other lovely person for tonight, Henk Lowe. Henk, could you do the same? Can you, I mean, it's lovely to see you, and thanks for joining us. Can you give us a bit of a rundown of where you fit into all of this too, please?
Yes, kia ora, Nick, and everybody, thanks for joining us. My name is Henk Lowe, and originally I'm from South Africa, and grew up at the foothills of Taiao Mountain. So if you can kind of picture that long flat mountain in Cape Town, that's originally where I'm from. But I've been here for over 10 years, and currently I live in Porirua, and have a really close connection with the Pātūnui Inlet. And I work for the Wellington City Council as part of the urban ecology team. And some of you might know me from the pest animal side of urban ecology. And for last year, I've been seconded into the urban ecology manager role. We've had the opportunity to put something on like this or present something like this from the WCC side. So it's been great to be able to put on something where we can have a chat about restoration and weeds and pests and all sorts of things. And share those stories and learn from each other.
All right, Rā, now Henk and I get to sit back and have a coffee and listen to what you have to say. I've got a lovely presentation I'm going to put up now on the screen. It's all up to you, Rā. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys. That's an exciting week coming up. Just mihi to everybody to welcome you on into tonight's Mauri Tūhono presentation. So, kei te mihi ki a koutou in ho o Te Upoko Taiao, Te Upoko o Te Ika. Kia ora koutou. So this is our program, and we'll talk a little bit about Mauri Tūhono soon, but it's about a framework, and I'd like to invite you to be a part of the framework and be a part of the thinking. And it's a thinking that a whole range of people already have around Wellington, but we want to extend that from people who got that interest and have everybody acknowledge that they have an interest in the environment too. And so we're going to have a look how we do that. We'll talk to Mauri Tūhono soon in terms of a kōrero, but one that's down the bottom here in the kind of subtext is Kaipupuri taonga ki te ao Whānui. So that's talking about how we can be holders of the treasure. And so in terms of the treasures are a little bit about our environment. This next one is our karakia, and so grateful to the chair of Mauri Tūhono, Charlene Mawata Davis, for writing this karakia. Just wanted to say that when New Zealanders who aren't Māori have indigenous structures in front of them or indigenous rituals, often as a Māori myself, when we do this, there's a lot of respect and we appreciate that. And other times, in a fewer Māori rituals, people participate. For example, the haka is one example of where people are participating. You'll hear a lot of Māori terms tonight, and what we'd like to do is have people lean into these terms, because I think what you'll find is that we share a lot of the ideas and the thinking that's going on here. And so even in the first line where we acknowledge the spiritual essence, there are some who might not have a religious belief but have a spiritual belief, and might be those who just think a little differently when they're in the ngahere or they're under the sea, and into that world. There's something extra that's going on. In as Māori, we like to call that wairua, but there's also a mauri or a life force that we can feel that's a part of that. And so invite you this evening to lean into that and to think about the ideas and think about how these ideas apply to you, and that they're perhaps universal ideas as well as Māori ideas. So here's what we call a hero image, and thinking about all the different things of our Taiao, our environment. And even though it's a static image, there's so many things caught in action. So while there's the flight of the bird on the left, a kotuku, then there's the other things that we might think about in terms of changing light, in terms of the sun and the stars. So all of these things have an energy and a life force. And that's what Māori is a little bit about, a lot about, is the life essence that all of the different things of our environment have. And then tūhono is how do we connect to that? So a connection. And that's within the region, which is the Upoko o Te Ika. So the head of the fish of Maui, and what's the life that's going on there. If you've ever been swimming out into the inshore fishery and been down there looking at fish, and if you can tell me where all the crayfish are, I'd really appreciate that, because that's a source of life as well. That's really important. But when you're there and you're connecting, you start to feel a few things about what that's all about. So if we're still for a moment out in our environment, and this is a picture of Castle Point, and named by James Cook, when he looked across to the shoreline and thought, oh, there's a castle there, and that's a kind of form of the land. There might have been some missing of home by Captain Cook, but there were. It's the shape of our land and the features of our land, and if we listen close enough, we can hear the karanga. He karanga ki te hunga, ngā kaunui ana i te Taiao. It's a call from who care for the natural environment. It's a call to you from the environment, the natural environment here in the Wellington region. We've made some good starts, and aren't we so lucky to have places like Zealandia? But for many of us, there are many really quiet spaces where we might get to ourselves and contemplate the things of the world. And if we can listen just for a moment, we might hear the karanga of the Taiao. So he moimoia no te Taiao. So this is the vision from the Taiao. So yeah, you can see how we're putting the environment of the Taiao into a first-person situation where we're thinking about what's the Taiao, what's the environment want to say to us. And so the vision is te pūwaitanga o te Taiao ki te Upoko o te Ika. And so the vision that the Taiao is giving us is towards a flourishing in the Wellington region. And that flourishing is where the environment reaches its full potential. And so when we think about what an environment wants to do, does it want to be used by others, or does it really want to blossom? So the root word puai, it means to blossom, and the tanga is the system of blossoming. And so here's the Taiao wanting to blossom. So Mauri Tūhono is about sustaining and restoring the Māori of Te Taiao and people through entwining our efforts. And so in terms of us coming together and weaving different things, the whenua is like some strands. And so the strands that will make up the blossoming, or that will form the action of the blossoming, these 7 strands here. And we'll talk about those strands tonight a little more individually. But sometimes when we look at the environment, we might just think of single elements. And we might really want to think about, actually, we're dealing with a complex ecosystem. And the complex system has many different parts. And just starting off with fauna and flora. But those are often built on top of soil or the earth, and their response to that. And so there's many different parts that we need to think, how do we weave all of these parts? Tonight, while some of them might be expressed a little differently from what we hear normally, I'm thinking that you will also find that these are things that you have thought about already. The first one is mō tātou mā tātou. So our Taiao, or our environment, is for everyone, everywhere. This seems a little funny to say because we live in an environment, and while that's true, but sometimes when somebody says, if you want to see a flourishing environment, they might say, go down to or go out to a conservation piece of land, because that's where the environment has been conserved and flourished. And now I think that it's time that we move past that type of thinking, where we're just having our environment in its full flourishing state out in the conservation land, often away from where population centres are. We want to think about how does the environment flourish everywhere? Should we be looking at the Wellington Harbour and thinking, well, you should only be used for ships? Or can we think about how the Wellington Harbour can flourish and all the different other spots that we have? One of my private dreams is to be thinking about when will Lake Wairarapa flourish? And so from someone from Wairarapa, that's how important things are for us. So one of the things that we need to think about is ko te Taiao ko au. And so that's the Taiao at the heart of what we do. And so there are many reasons why the Taiao might be at the heart, but in terms of just our well-being and our connecting to it. In Māori, we have a term called tangata whenua, and as you know from Māori terms, there's many different translations. And so tangata whenua can mean people who have a genealogical connection to the land. There can be the people who, in terms of the treaty signing, the Treaty of Waitangi, one group was Te Tangata o Treaty, Te Tangata Treaty, and the other group, Tangata Whenua. And so in the context of the Treaty of Waitangi, that's what the Tangata Whenua means. But there's another meaning for Tangata Whenua, and that's people affected by the land. How many of us are affected by the land? And how many of us, when we come back to New Zealand often, sometimes when we're living in New Zealand, we take it for granted. But when we go overseas and we come home, how many of us think I'm home because you see all the different things of New Zealand? And what you normally see is the environment. And so we encourage people to have a piece of their heart in terms of how they might think about that. Tūranga means our place in Te Taiao. There's another lovely word called tūranga waiwai, and that's when our feet are woven in, standing in a place. And we can stand in a place metaphorically as well, and that's what tūranga means, our place in Te Taiao. What is our place in Te Taiao? Well, sometimes we think that we could, as environmental managers, as that's been my title, we can be thinking that environment managers might be able to manage the environment. I would like to just challenge anyone, if they are in an earthquake, think about how they can manage an earthquake. There's going to be hardly any type of management that happens there. And so really, and while Māori have a belief about the forming of our whenua, of our land, of this planet, of the earth, and there are many other different, like Christian beliefs, and there's also scientific beliefs. But many of them do not start with people first. Many of them start with the environment first, and actually people coming last. So our place in the Taiao, in the environment, is to be thinking, actually, how can we work with the environment? Rather than how can I have mastery over the environment? How can I set the environment so that its conditions, its way of growing, can be the thing that occurs? And so remember our dream, our goal, our vision was to have a blossoming and a Taiao, an environment that reaches its potential. Are we getting in the way of its potential by thinking of some places as water attenuation places for floods, rather than thinking about it in all of the different functions that it has, like, for example, being a habitat to indigenous flora and indigenous fauna. And so really what we might be setting in place is allowing the environment to take care of itself and being able to work alongside the Taiao or the environment, so that all of those things can come together. And while we've been talking about our human connections to the Taiao, we might also want to think about our connections to each other. And sometimes in some fields of interest to do with the environment, we do often think about a human connection, but sometimes a human connection disconnected from the environment. And sometimes this is done for trying to achieve objectivity. But what if we were, rather than working as a master of the environment or distinct from the environment, what would it mean to work with the environment? What would it mean to be seen as a part of the environment? So our connection to each other then is, if we are connecting to each other, we also know that we're connecting to the part of the environment that we might be entrusted with in terms of being kaitiaki, that we might have some research ideas about, that we might be just helping to be set right, and to think about how we can allow our environment to have the best type of growth it can so it can reach its potential. Sometimes that means to take away pests so that birds and bats and a whole range of our fauna can exist without being challenged by pests. Sometimes it's about thinking about how can we allow our plants to have the best opportunity to blossom. How can we have our plants have the best opportunity to reach its potential? And sometimes that means taking out pests. And I guess one of those pests is old man's beard, but if you can resist taking me out, that would be good. And so in terms of hononga, how do we connect to each other and think about how we can weave with different groups and different interest areas? I'm just going to give a shout out to Enviro Schools and think about the school communities. I do that because that's a great way of learning about our environment and who we are, and thinking about these shifts or these whenua that we're trying to weave together, our connection to each other, working with our place in the environment and our love for the environment. And as we feel that, we can start to tell people about Mauri Tūhono, the connecting to a life force. Maramatanga, what do we know to be true? And so as I look at the feature that we have here, I'm reminded that New Zealand has 80,000 endemic species, and thinking about what we actually know about those species. There are things that we know and that we might, that we should be putting in place to enable our environment to reach its full potential. And we want that to be happening in many places, whether I've already mentioned schools, but how about in council areas that district councils and regional councils are responsible for, in reserves and parks and our different open spaces? Could we be working there? If, like myself, you have a whānui that has responsibility for a land or for a river or for an ocean piece, or whether that's a inshore fishery that has given to our whānau over the many years, whether it's been the crayfish or the pāua or fish of every sort. And can we, as responsible kaitiaki, be looking at all the things we know about that, and how we might be helping talk to others, like in the hononga part, so that we can come together with all of our knowledge and support our environment so that it can reach its full potential. Te pātaka is, so while there's a storehouse or a whole range of knowledge yet to be realised in our environment, there's many other things as well. One that's really special to the heart of Māori is medicinal plants. And I wonder if we really know enough about our medicinal plants, like manuka, and the different chemistry and the different strengths that it has in terms of its not only its honey, but its roots in terms of generating activity with microbes and fungi, and how it colonizes the soil by preparing the soil for other plants to grow in. You know that we've got 6,000 endemic different types of fungi, and 2,000 of them still don't have names. That suggests to me that we might know that they're different, and we can know that by genetic sequencing or DNA testing. But do we know what their functions are in our soil? Can they be telling us a little more? And so the pātaka that we have is this storehouse of amazing things. 80 million years of evolution and for our environment to evolve outside of all of the other continents out there and pretty much in isolation. And so here's all the kind of information that we could be learning. While there's food that we can think about in this area, there's many other things like medicinal properties as well. Te manawa roa. And so one of the things that we know is that our environment can endure. It's endured many different climate changes already. And so the mini ice age was just one of those climate changes. Now we're into climate change again, and thinking about how our environment can help us in terms of overcoming the different effects of climate changes. So, for example, there's been a concentration on sponge cities where the city is soaking up a lot of its water, so we're not having to deal with floodwaters. What would a sponge catchment look like? Could we actually use our wetlands, use our aquifers to take on some of the floodwaters that are coming towards our towns? And so when we think about the life of some concrete structures, we might think that it's got a life of maybe 100, 120 years, which is quite a long time. But when we have regenerating environments, where now environments are enduring and are replacing themselves, now we've got a really long-term plan in front of us. And so rather than paying again for another concrete structure after 120 years, our environment can continue to blossom, continue to reach its potential and have all the different functions of our environment helping overcome things like climate change. And actually, rather than just overcoming it, helping us to reduce the amount of effects that climate change can come, that climate change has. For example, having some thinking about the carbon that we can take out of the atmosphere and put into our soils, where with carbon soils, we keep the moisture in our soils longer. So rather than wasting water, we can have water stay in our soils a little longer. And then have we really found out the amount of carbon things like seaweed can be holding, the carbon that things like wetlands could be holding. And so when we start to think about these things, we might think about, rather than just enduring climate change, kind of minimizing its effects so that we're challenging climate change with the best things of our environment which has reached its potential. Sorry, just trying to click. Oh, there we go. Oh, I went too far now. Sorry.
I think we're both doing it. You go.
Yeah, thanks. And just as he does that, he clicks something else. Can you do it? Thanks, Nick. Sorry.
Sure, there it is.
And so in terms of this framework that we're presented tonight, you'll notice that many of the things that we've said are things that people are thinking about already. I'm going to suggest to you that that's a little part about thinking about our environment as New Zealanders. There's some changes that we might need to make amongst all of the New Zealanders. Thinking about the environment can be everywhere and for everybody, and not just held in conservation estates. That we dealing with the environment all the time, and we need to know our place in supporting the environment. and where it's in our hearts. All of these things are part of the engagement that we have consistently with our Taiao. Just like to let you know that the period of engagement about this framework is to the end of May, the 31st of May. And so please have a look on the websites under Mauri Tūhono and fill out a survey there that will allow you to make a submission about this framework. Now, I really want to stress the framework. And the reason why we're stressing framework is because this isn't about persuading people through legislation. This isn't about saying this is the action plan that we're all going to follow. This is about a framework working alongside different groups who want to make a difference. This is a framework about getting a collective consciousness about what New Zealanders think about our environment. And that I think through this, that we can all become tangata whenua, that we can all be people that are affected by the land. And then what we want to do is make an intentional thought and intentional action to work alongside our environment so that our environment can flourish and be all that it's meant to be and can reach its potential. We can then shift toward implementation and action after we see this framework and think about what are the things that we can do. Just one real quick idea is all of the 7 shifts that we've talked about, putting them as a checklist so that when we do anything in the environment, when we do anything in our rivers, when we do anything in our ngahere, when we do anything in the sea, we can ask this very simple question. Is this for everyone? Could this be everywhere? And then the other part, the question that we should be asking, of course, will this help our environment to reach its full potential? Will this help our environment to flourish? So those are some ways, but we don't want to limit the implementation and actions that you can take. Please think about the ones that you have. One person once said that we need a team of 5 million. I'm not too sure what our team is numbers-wise in the Wellington region, but let's just say it's 500,000. Well, we need a team of 500,000 working in this area to think about how we can support the environment. And that's quite clearly not to manage, but just to allow the environment to grow and to reach its potential. There's an opportunity to share your thoughts and have your say through the website. You'll know that after the May 31st deadline for commenting on the structure, that there will be a whole range of other work done on Mauri Tūhono. And one thing actually from tonight is to think about filling out this a very simple survey and listen to the karanga. Sorry, that's there's that survey and submission, but there's another survey online that I think has been mentioned in the chat room. Please think about filling that out so we can think about that. All right, Whānui, I'm ready for the tough part of my presentation now to try and answer the questions. And so if there's any questions, I'm thinking that there might be a line of them, but if there's not and you have a question, please put it on the chat room and we'll address some of those questions. How are we doing on that, Nick?
Very well. The offer is there. The chat room is there. Just write in the chat box whatever you'd like while we've got. Oh yes, there's a question straight in. We've got from Renee just to explain a little bit more what Te Taiao actually means.
Oh, so thankful for that question, because Te Taiao does mean the environment. But one of the things that you can do in Te Reo Māori is break up the compound word so that you can get a deeper meaning of the environment. And so the compound word Taiao has 2 parts, the tai and the ao. Now, the tai means like a tide. And the first word in a compound word is the noun or the verb. And then the second word is usually the adjective and adverb. Sorry that I'm going on grammar. I'm an ex-English teacher, and so you can see how important that is to me. But in terms of the Taiao, then it's the earthly tide. And you might think, well, I know that the water has a tide. How does the earth have a tide? Well, one of the ways that the earth has a tide is in responding to the water tide. For example, when there's a high tide, there's a surge of water coming back up into the fresh water. And that fresh water then pushes up into the soil. And so the soil is feeling this tide in terms of the Taiao. And so the rhythm of the land then is the part that is really important to us, because the rhythm of the land, if we want the land to really affect us and be in time with the land, then we can acknowledge the rhythm of the land and be a part of that. In Māori, we often have things about rongoa as plants, and I hinted at that earlier. But there's an experiential rongoa as well. And that's just going into our places like our wetlands and being there and feeling all of the energy that's around us in terms of the environment. And so there's another rhythm going on. There's a rhythm of the Mauri. And that Mauri is sometimes enlivening us. We have a beautiful song that talks about puria nei. And puria nei means how do we cleanse ourselves from stresses and strains? One way is to go to the mountain and let the wind blow through your hair. Another one is to walk through the ngahere and think about all of that energy and getting in time with the rhythm of the land. Another one is to go swimming in some cold water and immersing yourself in that water and feeling alive. I can tell you that I used to feel alive in the midwinter swim in Dunedin, right out where the sea used to come into the swimming pool. And I remember we at the polar bear competition, we only had to jump in and jump out, and so I did that. My dad pushed me in again, and he said, "Swim a length." I can tell you that I felt every bit of energy in trying to swim that length. It might have been the fastest length I've done to that point, but there's some energy that comes that way. I don't want to leave out the sea because the rhythm of the land is one thing, but the rhythm of the sea with its waves is constant. And one of the things that we have in Wairarapa is, you're in Wairarapa, is when you go to the coast and the sea and you see another car and you think to yourself, overcrowded. And so, we love to have a whole beach to ourselves and just be there with the elements and feel the wind coming from Antarctica. So that's a long answer, hoping not to get any more questions. No, I'm ready to take any more questions.
I'm going to bring us across here to the bigger screen now. Henk, I saw you the whole way through Ra's fantastic presentation. I want to thank you, Ra. It's great. And we do have a couple of questions that I'm going to ask you in a sec. But Henk, I thought I'd bring you in right now. You're nodding your head a lot through that in a very affirmative way. You implemented a lot of the stuff, I imagine, already. Are you involved in it as well, majorly?
Well, I wasn't initially part of the Mauri Tūhono framework, but I was nodding because a lot of what you were saying, Ra, resonates really well and deeply with me. And like you said in the beginning, there's some universal and Maori principles and values. And so, coming from Africa, even there are some that are really resonating very deeply with what you were saying. And our place in Te Taio really, like I had the full experience of that probably 4 years ago, walking in Kandala Park, and it was just a little bit off the track, and there was nobody else. It was just a forest, and there was a feeling around me. I couldn't explain it, but it felt like a life force. And without getting too spiritual, it was just a really good connection, a wholesome connection, and something that stayed with me for many, many years. And like you say, when you want to refresh yourself, when you want to get out and kind of just clear your head, I mean, my go-to is the ocean as well. And it's usually sitting on a kayak and running my fingers through the water and kind of just that connection. But it really underpins just how small I am in the bigger scheme of things, and that I can make an impact. But what is the relevance of that? So I think that struck a real chord with me. And the other thing was the fact that you were saying with the fungi of 6,000 species, 2,000 that have not been named yet, and we don't fully understand their function. And even if we do understand the function, well, how do we live with those species? How do we actually understand the niche, the role that those species are fulfilling in our environment? And I guess it kind of translates to what we're seeing in Wellington with kaka and titipunamo and all sorts of bird life showing up in people's backyards. And all of a sudden we've got this new and interesting challenge of how do we live with the manu, So, and so there's a heap of Mauri Tūhono that already resonates with me, that I can draw into and lean into. And I guess it's us as Wellington City Councils, our opportunity to look into how do we create those spaces to facilitate, to make that connection, and to bring people along on the journey.
You mentioned or both of you did mention sponges, and you also mentioned Enviro schools and the work done there. Sponges to me are the kids of this great area we live in. Can you give me tell me how you reckon they're coming on to all of this, because they're our future generations.
As we've seen from a climate emergency and a whole range of other things, young people are really concerned about the future, and with every right to be concerned about the future in terms of, too many things are getting to tipping points where we are just, how many threatened species do we have? And some of those species can't be found anywhere else in the world. And so we really need to be joining with them. And as people who might be a little older and might look too closely like Santa Claus, they need to be, we need to be thinking, how do we join alongside? And so nothing like intergenerational work and learning. And sometimes there's older people, we think we like to know it, we know everything. But I'm going to suggest that there's a whole lot more to learn in terms of our environment, in terms of the things that we could be working on. One of the things that we're trying to do here in Mauri Tūhono is sometimes when we look at pests, and this is the right way to do it, so there's no criticism about the people in terms of pests, but it's almost like they've got a wanted poster for it. And we want these dead or alive type thing. And what about on the positive side? Should we have a wanted poster for things that we want to keep? And the young people will tell us there's not any of those things that we want to lose. What if we had Enviro schools when the huia was here? And what if we had Enviro schools when moa were around? Could we have thought, rather than make them Kentucky Fried moa, how can we live with these things? How can we live with our environment? So the way that we could be learning, rather than schools over here, adults over there, old people with grey hair somewhere else, how about we all come together? And that's one of the pieces, hononga. We need to be alongside our Enviro schools as a school community and working alongside our kids. I think that transformation, even though we've made great steps, there's still a bigger transformation to happen.
Rachel actually just asked a question of any examples that you guys can think of, something that is working in the Greater Wellington area well across all these dimensions, or most of them, as she's put in brackets.
Oh, what a time to ask, Rachel. In terms, I want to say something for Greater Wellington, because not many people know, but tomorrow there's going to be a big change in Greater Wellington. They're changing their whole culture tomorrow. And one of the things is that some of the things that we talked about tonight that are part of the Mauri Tūhono were things that a Wairarapa community talked about in the Rua Mahanga Whaitua. And the people of Greater Wellington recognised that they couldn't have a response to it. And so what they did was to change the whole culture of their organisation so that they can have a response to it. And so that sounds, Rachel and others, that Greater Wellington hasn't done what you've asked about in terms of having some of these examples. But I want to tell you that rather than keeping the same organisation that had the same problems, or just adding something to them and it not quite working, they've taken the brave choice to transform their organisation so that they can take on Mauri Tūhono. One of the people in Greater Wellington, the CE, Nigel Corrie, said this should be the ethos for Greater Wellington, Mauri Tūhono. And so in terms of the ethos, just wanted to add one more word there, intentional. This is the intentional ethos for Greater Wellington. I'm going to suggest to you something else, though. And while I've enjoyed watching Greater Wellington change, what does the Wellington region look like in changing? What if it became our intentional ethos? That we think about these things for everybody. You don't have to be a member of the Green Party or somebody who's well known for being a Greenie. You're just somebody who works with the environment, because that's who we are. People who have had the environment affect us and change us and mold us who we are. And all we're doing is recognising what it's done. Can I just give an example for Greater Wellington? And soon they might hire me as their cheerleader. But one of the things that we have is manawa roa. And actually, Greater Wellington's taken on a section of their operations to think about intergenerational work. And so how do we do something that has multiple generations in its efficiency and in its effectiveness and the way that we can grow it? And we talked about that. And so here's a group, if we put in front of them the different, how long the life can be, that's something that they'll look at. Another group are looking at different bases of knowledge than just science. Don't get me wrong, science is an important piece of knowledge. But when you've got 80,000 endemic species, and in some areas, only a third of them you know about, there might be some information from other spaces. And for example, Māori have lived through climate change. How did we live through climate change? We made some mistakes. Let's not make them again. But in terms of working with the environment, there were some things that we looked at there. So those are just two of the many different things that new sections of work and sections of operation that Greater Wellington have. And I'm going to suggest that actually at our marae, we've got a few of those already in terms of intergenerational working and in terms of thinking about the environment and being tangata whenua. But are there other things we can do? Could we be connecting better to our community and environmental groups? And how can we be sharing information and knowledge so that we can work together in our environments?
Thank you, Ra. It's brilliant. And a great kickoff to our whole webinar series.
For everybody tuned in, thank you again. Kia ora koutou. Kei te mihi, kia koutou anō.
I just want to thank everybody for making the time and also for volunteering in general. We wouldn't be able to put up Restoration Day if we it wasn't for the community volunteering, because it's all about you. In the end, Ra, thank you very much. Those insights on Mauri Tūhono, I think a framework and some ideas to really digest and really think about. Yeah, just thank you very much to Nick and Bryony for putting it together. And I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow night.
Kia ora koutou, kia ora kōrua.
Kia ora. Bye-bye, everybody. See you.
Bye-bye.